Just stand by the walls, Sophia. No need to greet the guests. They didn't come here for you." Veronica Royce's voice was thin and cold, like a sheet of ice, a sentence that seemed gentle on the surface, yet pierced the skin, like a needle in the middle of the most opulent setting among the elite. Sophia clutched the gift box in her hands. The wrapping paper was slightly frayed at the edges, but it was tied carefully with a silver ribbon she had spent the entire evening choosing. She stood at the edge of the grand hall in the Lakeview Crown Estate, where the ceiling soared more than 26 feet high, and baccarat chandeliers hung like stars imprisoned in glass. Everything in the room glowed except her. The black dress she wore wasn't from any designer collection. Her neatly tied-up hair earned no compliments. She was like an ink stain, accidentally dropped onto a violin concerto, playing among diamonds and Swarovski-studded evening gowns. "Who's that girl?" a guest asked, raising a martini glass without hiding the scrutiny in their eyes. "I thought she was part of the staff," a woman murmured with a slight laugh. "No, that's the daughter they kept hidden for years. Rumor has it the parents only took her back because of some messy DNA scandal." Another voice chimed in, loud enough for those outside the conversation to hear. Veronica didn't turn around. Charles, the man who once fathered her, didn't bother to look either. They stood in the center of the room as if Sophia were an empty space that needed to be covered up with silence and forgetfulness. But she didn't move. She didn't run. She simply stood there, alone. No explanations, no pleas for recognition. Just a calm gaze radiating from behind hazel eyes, long accustomed to being the outsider. And it was that silence, unwavering in a room, drowning in extravagance and pretense, that made everyone else feel the most uneasy. 11 years ago, Sophia Moore was standing in a small kitchen in New Jersey when a single phone call changed her entire life. A simple blood sample sent in at the suggestion of her biology teacher had led her to a truth no one was prepared for. She was the biological daughter of Charles and Veronica Royce, people who had never called her daughter, never written a letter, never paid a visit, and certainly didn't celebrate when the truth came to light. Back then, she was 18, living with her adoptive parents in a working-class neighborhood, newly awarded a full scholarship to NYU. Meanwhile, the Royce family was celebrating the acquisition of another financial tower in Manhattan, and no one remembered the child who had been accidentally switched at birth 2 decades earlier. Veronica only agreed to meet her after rumors started leaking to the press. The first reunion happened in a tea lounge at the Waldorf Astoria. There were no tears, no embraces, just a folder of documents and a sentence cold as steel. "From now on, you will carry the Royce name live by the Royce Code and remain silent about the past." Sophia asked for nothing from them, but still she nodded. Because there's one thing the wealthiest people never seem to understand: for children raised in scarcity, recognition can be more valuable than any inheritance. Yet even that she never truly received. Though she spent nearly 6 years in a small penthouse that had been assigned to her, Sophia was always told to stay away from major family events. Her face was missing from the wedding album of her cousin Vanessa. There was no seat for her at the family's winter banquets, no public introduction to the press. To society, she was a close associate of the Royce family. To the family itself, she was a quiet shadow, kept around out of obligation, never embraced out of love. And today, standing in the grand hall where the entirety of American high society had gathered, that shadow was pushed even further into the background. They let her come, but no one ever intended for her to be seen. A server walked past, nearly tripping over the hem of Sophia's dress. He didn't apologize. He simply rolled his eyes, glanced at her from head to toe, and gave a crooked smirk. Across the room, a group of guests clinked their glasses and burst into laughter. Their eyes kept darting toward her like she was an unscripted act in a carefully choreographed play. Veronica Royce stepped into the center of the hall, dazzling in an emerald green evening gown custom-made in Milan. Each of her steps shimmered under the ceiling lights like a runway. She stopped directly in front of Sophia. "Oh, you came too," Vanessa said loudly enough for a dozen people around them to hear. For the first time in Royce party history, we even have a representative from New Jersey. Laughter erupted first from Vanessa's inner circle. Then it rippled outward like a quiet but poisonous wave. Sophia said nothing. She simply gripped the gift box a little tighter. Still, Vanessa wasn't done. She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "No handbag, or did you forget it at the thrift store?" More laughter. A male guest, in a gemstone-studded tuxedo, raised his hand to cover his mouth, but not quickly enough to hide the contempt in his eyes. A woman whispered behind a glass of champagne. Probably wandered into a rich person's living room and can't find her way out. Sophia didn't step back. She didn't lower her head, but her hands began to tremble. Moments later, Clara, the housekeeper, who had served the Royce family for over 30 years, approached, stood next to Sophia, and said, in a tone as clear as a command, "Miss, if you're looking for the staff quarters, the side entrance is in the back. The main doors are reserved for guests officially on the list." Clara didn't meet Sophia's eyes. She spoke as if issuing a favor, as if Sophia's presence was an inconvenience to be discreetly removed. Laughter broke out again, now mixed with the sound of clinking glasses and rapid camera shutters. Sophia looked directly at Clara, then at the crowd. Her eyes didn't well up. They were cold, deep, so unflinching that it made people blink first. But still, she just stood there, silent, like a pillar of stone in a room swept by toxic winds. The insults were hurled toward her like shards of crystal falling from the chandelier above. No one stepped in. No one defended her, because in their eyes, she wasn't worth protecting. The piano music stopped. The grand hall fell silent, as if an invisible director had snapped his fingers. It was time for the gift presentation to Henry Royce, the man of the hour, the father, the grandfather, and the founder of the financial empire that now sprawled across half of Manhattan. Vanessa stepped forward first, like a queen assuming her rightful place. "I have something special for you, Grandpa," she said, her voice echoing with perfect clarity throughout the hall. "A Patek Philippe Celestial limited edition, only 7 in the world. One of them now belongs to you." Applause erupted. Camera flashes burst in all directions. Every nod of approval in the room translated to reaffirmed power. Vanessa leaned in to kiss her grandfather on the cheek, her gown twirling gracefully in a move clearly rehearsed to perfection. And then came Sophia. No one called her name. No one made space for her. She simply stepped forward quietly, both hands cradling a small box, a gift she had spent a year saving for from her teacher's salary purchased at an antique shop in Chinatown. She opened the lid. Inside was a jade bracelet, a deep rain-soaked green, smooth like water after a storm. No diamonds, no designer label, just a single hand-engraved line, delicate and thoughtful. Sophia held out the gift with both hands. Veronica laughed. "Oh, handmade, looks like something off Canal Street for $30. Charles shook his head and smirked. "Probably a clearance item on Etsy. Someone's clinging to their humble roots." Clearly, Vanessa added, her eyes gleaming with smug delight. Laughter followed. Some tried to keep it polite. Others let it burst out freely. A well-known businesswoman murmured, Did she make that herself? In a pottery class? How touching. Sophia said nothing. She simply bowed her head, slightly placed the box on the ornate side table, and stepped back. No defense, no explanation. But her eyes, as she turned away from the spotlight, made one man in the crowd falter. He didn't clap. He didn't laugh. And in that brief moment, for the first time all evening, there was a gaze not born of arrogance or mockery, but of someone beginning to question everything that had just taken place. Amid the lingering echoes of laughter, sharp and grating like splinters in the air, a weathered yet steady hand reached out from the front row and gently lifted the small box, resting quietly on the glass table. Albert Lin. A name that brought instant silence to the entire room. He was a legendary antiquities collector, a lifelong friend of Henry Royce, and a man known for identifying authenticity with nothing more than a touch. Though over 70, every word he spoke still carried more weight than a billion-dollar contract. He held the bracelet between two fingers. The chandelier's light refracted off the jade's mossy green surface, casting a faint halo around him like the glow of truth awakening from slumber. No one dared interrupt. His eyes narrowed. His index finger brushed the carved inner band. His eyelids flickered. Then came a long, measured breath, not of exhaustion, but of realization. What lay in his hand was no ordinary trinket. He looked up. "If I may," he said clearly, "I ask for a moment of silence." The only remaining sound was the faint clink of crystal glasses trembling on a far-off table. "This is not some cheap, handcrafted item," he continued. "This bracelet was carved from a single piece of uncut Myanmar jade. The precision of the cuts and the clarity meet museum-grade standards. But what's truly remarkable is the engraving inside." He rotated the jade piece, pointing to a set of markings nearly invisible to the untrained eye. "This is the seal of a 15th-century Tibetan Lama. I've seen one just like it in the private collection of the National Museum of China, and another preserved within the Patala Palace itself. But the third piece has never been seen." He paused, then slowly turned his sharp gaze towards Sophia. Until today, the room held its breath. Vanessa stood frozen. Veronica pulled her hand away from her wineglass, but forgot to set it down. Charles shifted a step back, as if instinctively trying to avoid Albert's gaze. And Sophia, still standing where she had been all along. Her hands now hung at her sides, relaxed. But her eyes, no longer downcast, swept calmly across the entire room. Not with anger, not with pride, but with a chilling serenity, as if she had always known this moment would come and had simply been waiting for the truth to speak on her behalf. She didn't have to say a word, because from that very second, the entire room began to turn toward her. The grand hall's main doors swung open without warning. No announcement, no music, just the decisive entrance of a man in a charcoal tuxedo, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor like the hammer of justice. His face was sharp, his gaze focused, followed by 3 bodyguards in black suits and a personal driver holding an umbrella, moving in perfect formation as if there were nothing unusual about barging into the most exclusive gathering of America's elite. A group of guests near the door stood up abruptly. Someone whispered, "It's Nathan Hale." The room of over 300 guests fell completely silent. Everyone knew that name. CEO of Hale International. The man who once sent Wall Street into a tailspin with a single tweet. A figure who never showed up at meaningless social events. And yet tonight, he was here. And he was walking straight toward Sophia. He didn't greet anyone, didn't stop, didn't smile at a single member of the Royce family. When he reached Sophia, he halted. Without saying a word, he gently took her hand, bowed, and kissed the back of it with reverence, before turning to look directly at Henry Royce. "Apologies for being late," Grandfather Nathan said clearly, his voice calm, but echoing through the hall. "I just left a meeting with the IMF delegates, but I couldn't miss the birthday of the grandfather most adored by my wife." The words landed like a thunderclap. Veronica took half a step back. Charles froze his hand, still gripping his glass. Vanessa seemed yanked off stage, her dazzling dress now no more than a peeled-back curtain on an exposed performance. The mocking laughter from earlier evaporated as if it had never existed. Nathan turned to Sophia, his voice lowered steady. "I didn't know they'd treat you like this, but don't worry. Tonight, this ends." He retrieved a tablet from his assistant, tapped once on the screen, then turned it toward Henry. "This is the list of individuals and organizations Hale International will be severing all investment ties with permanently if Sophia Moore, the only person I fully trust, is not given the respect and position she rightfully deserves." No one dared move, not a single breath. One word from Nathan Hale could collapse any hedge fund shutter subsidiaries or derail the political careers of several people in this very room. Sophia still said nothing, but the way she looked at her husband made it feel as though the world had finally realigned itself. For the first time that evening, she was no longer alone. And in that moment, the high society elite, who once believed they held the power, finally understood one thing: you don't need to shout to prove your worth. You just need to stand beside the right person and let the truth speak for itself. Henry Royce sat silently in his crimson velvet armchair at the highest point of the room. The silver-tipped walnut cane by his right hand trembled slightly as he lifted it with a deliberate motion. No one spoke, but everyone sensed it clearly. Judgment was about to be delivered. He tapped the cane gently against the floor. The sound echoed solidly, like the closing gavel of a courtroom. "I've stayed silent for far too long," he said, his eyes sweeping across every face, every gown, every tie that had moments ago mocked his own granddaughter. "I let my son and his wife make decisions about Sophia because I believed it was the right thing. I thought the Royce name still knew the difference between justice and betrayal, between blood and pretense. But tonight, I've seen enough." He turned to Sophia, his gaze filled with both pride and regret. "She is not just my granddaughter. She is the only person in this room who didn't need to lie to earn respect, who didn't need diamonds to deserve dignity, who didn't need the Royce name to prove her worth. And for that reason alone, as of this moment, I declare Sophia Moore is the sole legal heir to all my personal assets and to the Royce Holdings empire." The room exploded in stunned silence. Vanessa staggered back a step. Veronica stood frozen. Charles looked at his father as if he had just been disowned. A few investors and VIP guests lowered their heads, unable to meet Henry's gaze, as if afraid he might read their cruel remarks from earlier straight off their faces. From this moment on, Henry continued, his voice low but unshakable. "Anyone who disrespects Sophia disrespects me. And anyone who has looked down on her, prepare to face the consequences." Immediately, Nathan's assistant stood up and began distributing the sanctions list. Vanessa Royce was stripped of all inheritance rights, removed from the family foundation, and expelled from the board of directors. Her personal PR accounts were frozen. All pending sponsorship deals were cancelled. Margaret and Charles Royce were removed from every position tied to Royce Holdings and lost access to all family assets. Richard Voss, the man who mocked Sophia's dress, was eliminated from the priority investor list and blacklisted from all official corporate events. Clara, the housekeeper, who had tried to send Sophia out the back door, was fired on the spot and banned from working at any Hale or Royce property for the next 10 years. Not a single voice from the opposing side dared object, because they knew arguing now would mean ending their own careers. And Sophia still stood quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't bow in thanks. She simply inclined her head slightly toward Henry, her eyes softening for just a brief moment, in what felt like a slow, silent bow of gratitude for a recognition she had waited a lifetime to receive. She never asked for power. She only wanted the truth. And tonight, truth chose her side. One by one, they stepped forward. No one gave the order. No reminders were needed. But they all knew if they didn't bow their heads tonight, there would be no tomorrow left for them in this world. Richard Voss was the first. "I apologize for looking down on you," he said, eyes lowered. Next came the senator's daughter. Then a few who had once laughed the loudest were now whispering regret under their breath. Vanessa was escorted out of the room. Her emerald gown could not salvage a reputation already rotting. Veronica stood, motionless. Charles opened his mouth to speak, but Sophia never looked back. They no longer deserved it. She stood tall in the black dress, once mocked as plain, but now a symbol of unshakable composure. At her side was Nathan, the man who had made the entire room bow with a single sentence: "She is the one I trust most." No shouting, no revenge. Sophia walked forward, leaving behind the chandeliers and the names that once believed themselves untouchable. And the world at last fell silent to witness a woman they once ridiculed walk past them in victory. This story reminds us that some people are not underestimated because they are weak, but because they refuse to play by the rules of the pretenders. Sophia didn't need revenge. She simply stood her ground and let the truth speak for itself. And that silence was powerful enough to bring an entire empire to its knees. Never underestimate someone just because they don't wear glitter on the outside. If you believe that dignity doesn't need to scream to be recognized, give this video a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story so you never miss the most deeply inspiring stories.